Hi, and welcome back to Mon's PC Tips and Tricks. And in today's video, I'll be covering how you can choose the best B450 motherboard for your gaming PC. Now, essentially, if you haven't seen my first video, I'm just going to give a quick recap on the various budgeting factors that you should be looking at when looking into buying a motherboard. So as for the motherboard, you want to spend around 7 to 10% of your total budget, and some of the factors that you want to look into before buying your motherboard, including ensuring that you can match the generation of the CPU. So what that means is if you're getting a newer CPU, you might want to look into getting a newer motherboard. And you also want to check the number of RAM slots you'll be requiring. So if you'll be doing lots of streaming or RAM intensive loads of work, you might want to look into an ATX motherboard as it contains 4 RAM slots, whereas a micro ATX motherboard might only have 2. If you're going for a dual GPU setup, you might get a motherboard with more PCI Express slots, as some micro ATX motherboards might not come with 2, and you want to ensure that you check the sizings before you go ahead and make your purchase. And last but not least, you want to make sure that you get warranty on this product. Obviously, that's up to you. However, I think it does prove to be extremely beneficial, as if you do get a faulty part, you can switch your motherboard out, and the motherboard is quite important as that's the part that everything goes on, so getting warranty on it would just give you peace of mind. So to begin, I want to start off by talking about the best valued motherboard there is in the B450 market. Now this is the ASRock B450 Pro 4 or the Pro 4F. Now the only difference that I'm aware of is just the color, as the specs are basically the same. Now for this motherboard, it costs around $100 Canadian. The VRMs are about mid-range, so essentially what this is VRMs is the ability for mother to overclock a motherboard. So with this motherboard, you can do around amateur overclocking, and it contains 2 CPU fan headers, 3 fan headers, 2 12-volt RGB headers, as well as 1 5-volt RGB header. Now, moving on to the best performance B450 motherboard. Now, this is the MSI B450 Gaming Plus Max, and another one that is also as for the best performance is the MSI B450 Tomahawk Max. Now, I chose this one as it has relatively the same specs, however, it is a bit cheaper than the Tomahawk, and this motherboard goes for around $150 Canadian, and it has a high-end VRMs, so it is a solid overclocker, and you can get good amounts of overclocking done for whatever that may be. This motherboard also contains 2 CPU fan headers, 4 fan headers, and then 12-volt RGB headers. Moving on to the next motherboard I'll be talking about, which is the best non-overclockable motherboard, and that's the Gigabyte B450 Aorus M. Now, it goes for $100 Canadian, and like I mentioned, the VRMs on it are not very good, so you won't be able to get much overclocking done. But if you're not really looking into overclocking anyways, this is the best motherboard out there in the B450 sections. So the motherboard includes one 12-volt RGB header, 2 5-volt RGB headers, and then 2 regular fan headers. And then moving on to last but not least, the last motherboard that we have on our list, which is the best looking B450 motherboard. Now, if you don't really care about how much it can overclock, or if you're not looking into the RAM slots, PCI Express slots, anything like that, as this motherboard is ATX, so you will get most of that included within the $150. So this is the ASRock B450M Steel Legend, and as you can see just from the picture, it has lots of RGB, which is really beneficial if all you really care about is making sure that your PC looks nice. So the VRMs aren't very great on this motherboard, like I mentioned, so there isn't much option to overclock. However, if you're not really looking into it, you'll be fine with this motherboard. It contains 2 CPU fan headers, 3 regular fan headers, and then one 12-volt RGB header, and you can control the RGB on this motherboard for any of the parts that you hook up to the motherboard itself. Anyways, that's all for today. I really hope you guys learned and enjoyed the video. Hopefully you have some sort of idea of which type of B450 motherboard you should be looking out for and which one you want to buy, as well as the various budgeting and factors you should be looking into before buying your B450 motherboard for your AMD setup. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and comment down below if you have any questions or concerns. Thanks for listening.